Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't know we were being videoed. Okay, I've been a Lutheran all my life. I was baptized when I was an infant and went through Sunday school and confirmation, and this actual wedding in 1978 was Deb and me in what was then one of the largest churches in North America. And I remember even in Sunday school, they gave you a little star when you attended every single day of the Sunday school. And, you know, I got that star a few times, a few years. I was there, you know. But the whole thing through going to Sunday school and being confirmed and the whole deal, it never took. I just did it. It just never took. I was sitting there saying all the right things, never took. I can't say it enough how, because I did the same thing as I got older. When Curt and Ashley were born, and we got them baptized, and they went to Sunday school, and Deb was pretty good about getting them over there, and we went to church a few times, and I was just mouthing the words. You know, if they had it, it just didn't take. Nothing took. Nothing happened. I remember that I was so full of myself, and I said this a few times, and it's been repeated back to me from people that I told this to, so I know it's a definite fact, is I said, if there was a God, He would show Himself to me, and I'd be His greatest employee. Now, I said that a number of times. Be careful what you ask for.
I remember when I first met him and we decided we were going to get married, and I was worried. I was worried because he didn't believe in God, and I thought, you know, I'm going to go to heaven, and he's not. But I still wanted to marry him because I still loved him, and you know, so we went through our life, and everything was fine, and we didn't go to church because, you know, my excuse was we were in our 20s, you know, we had more important things to do. And then we had the kids. We had Curtis and Ashley, and I'm, you know, born and raised a Lutheran, had to go to church. We had to get them baptized. They had to be confirmed. They're going to Sunday school. This is it. We're going back to church. We're going to church. So we found a church and did all that, and, you know, went through the motions, and we were doing really well. We were making good money, but we were starting to hang out with the wrong people. And I shouldn't even blame it on the other people. You know, it's just, you know, life and things in the 80s and, you know, and all that, and drugs and drinking and parties, and man, it was fun. We had such a good time. And, you know, the kids don't even know all the stuff that, you know, I wouldn't even want to tell you everything that we did or experienced or whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. We ended up where we are now because of God's redemption, because of His mercy and grace, and because He had a plan for us. Because if what happened to Him, He can get through it. You know there is a God. So here we are. We're going to all these parties. 45 years old, his high blood pressure because, you know, he's you know, work, do drugs, work, you know, not taking his medicine because he's, you know, he's awesome, you know, nothing's going to happen to him, and I'm like, okay. Well, we're driving down the freeway on October 25th, 2003, having a full day of, we visited our friends that had a little one who just turned 1. This is the day. This is October 25th, 2003. We were at that birthday party.
We look the same, don't we?
10 years ago. Anyway, she took that picture, and little did we know, that monkey shirt you're wearing, there's monkeys at the bottom. That was the last time you wore that shirt. We left there to go to visit my dad in a rehab hospital, and then we went and brought my mom home, and then we were on our way to a Halloween party. We were going to go home, change, put our costumes on, and do all that. You know, we were excited. We were going to have fun again. And headed west on I-10, and he gets this terrible headache. And he has headaches. Everybody has little headaches, and he never complains. He's a typical guy, but he's like, man, this is really bad. And the way he described it to me later was how it just kind of moved. It went from here to here to here to here. And, anyway, his face was super red, and he was just nauseous and wanted to throw up. And so he opened the windows and goes, you need to drive, which is weird. We need to go to a hospital. I'm like, okay, and he swings over to the side, and there's all kinds of traffic. I mean, on I-10, there's always construction. He swings open the door with all these cars going by and just jumps out and runs around. I'm like, okay, we're going to go. So anyway, he said, Memorial City, that's where we're going. Well, Saturday night, you would think that it would just be traffic. I'm telling you what, the C's part of first one of the miracles. We took the exit. There's construction, Memorial City, 2003. They were just changing all of their whole face. The doors were going to open up to Gessner instead of freeway, and everything was in construction. There's all kinds of walls. I mean, I was led right into that emergency room. And people afterwards that came to visit us, remember, Ben, had a hard time finding that emergency room because there was just a little thing, but I just right into it. So again, first one of the miracles. So we get there, and and everything goes on, but a couple more things before Curt talks about it. We were in the emergency room, and he was being tended to, and I was standing out in the hallway, and I was just like, shell-shocked. And what's going on? And in walks a man this is another first one of the miracles, from one of the doors, the back doors, and he's like, Debbie? Oh, he actually didn't even know my name. I didn't know his name either, but I knew him. I used to work, I still do, at 24-Hour Fitness. And you know how you see people all the time, you wave because you see them every day, right, Brandon? But I didn't know his name, and I was like, he's like, well, hey, how you doing? What are you doing here? And I said, I started to tell him what's going on. He goes, he's a respiratory therapist, and he said, I don't know why I'm in here. He goes, I was walking by the doors to go in here, and I just felt something tell me, I felt something tell me to open up those doors and come in. I had no reason to go into the emergency room at all. And he goes, so I know, and so then later on, I figured out why that happened, because this man helped us the whole night. He brought us Cokes, gave us, information about what was going on that I wouldn't have been able to find out otherwise, because I was in the waiting room, and he was an employee, so he was able to go back and forth and ask kind of questions. So there was a reason, and even afterwards, and I didn't say this in the first service, even afterwards, when I was in the room with him, he was always there. He was there to comfort me too. So that was amazing. So anyway, that was the first person that came into my life that was not a coincidence. Again, I don't believe in coincidences. So we get in the ICU finally, and we're at the end of the hallway, and this is the first time I'm walking down. They had been moved. And so I'm walking down the hallway, and again, it's new construction. They didn't even have the nameplates on the doors. And on the doors were just written in the name of the patient and the name of the doctor. And so I was walking by, I just happened to look over to the right, and one of the nameplates said, Dr. Diaz. And I was like, Dr. Diaz? I know a Dr. Diaz. I used to train a Dr. Diaz at 24-Hour Fitness. He was one of my first clients. And I'm like, no, I can't be the same guy. And I knew he was a neurologist. And this is a neuro because of the brain injury. So I asked one of the nurses, and turns out it was him. It was him. And praise God, he was one of these most doctors, I think they will come visit their patients later on in the mornings. They have things they do there. But Dr. Diaz, because he worked out, liked to see his patients early. And so he would get there super early in the morning, and let me tell you this, that was the worst time for me, because I'd been up all night. I stayed with him 24 hours a day, and all night long, he's pulling out his things and yelling at me, and I never had any sleep. And in the first thing in the morning, I mean, I was just exhausted and feeling alone and crying. Every single morning I was crying. But God placed Dr. Diaz there because he came walking in and he would always comfort me. And because he knew what was going on, it was such a comfort. And he could answer questions for me, and he was always there for me. Early in the morning, like 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, where nobody else was around, and I needed somebody then. So, let's see, where am I going? Okay, so we're in the waiting room, we're in the hospital, and so now the surgery, and Ben showed up. Ben, he was in the waiting room with us too, along with my kids, Curtis and Ashley, and we had this amazing prayer from one of my friends, and the friend that gave the prayer is the friend that we used to party with. And they, I mean, total transformation. This event changed their entire life too. But she'd gotten pregnant, and so they were kind of moving away from that scene anyway. So God gathered us around, and we said this prayer, and it was quite a few of us, friends and family. And then the doctor came in after several hours of waiting, and told us that, you know, the surgery went well. By the way, he had a cerebral brain hemorrhage, okay, with a 4-centimeter clot in his cerebellum, and they had to evacuate that clot. And the chances of him even recovering, living, but recovering, you know, a whole person was very slim. Most likely he would be, you know, disabled in some way. Well, anyway, this doctor, who was not a very nice man, because he was totally judging us, and I say that, I don't know for sure, but he knew what we had been doing, and you know, he was not happy with us, but anyway, he was like, you know, you're lucky. he lived, and you know what, he went up to God and shook his hand and came back. You know, and so I think it's your turn.
All right, I want to tell you what happened to me at that time. The last thing I remember was getting out of the truck, and I'd taken out a credit card, and the poor girl that was at the information booth, or the initial person, you know, sitting there, I feel sorry for her now, but I took my credit card and I threw it at her, and I said that I'm either going to die right here, or you're going to let me in. And that's the last thing I remember. I don't remember anything else except. And we've taken this time and, you know, tried to figure out time frames and that kind of stuff. And it had to be somewhere around the time of this prayer, because it was about 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I'm in a large room. Can't see any walls or ceilings or anything like that. No pain. Absolutely no pain. And I could see perfect. And thought I was dead. And so I didn't know how right I was. But then all of a sudden, I'm laying there, and I was laying there for a few seconds before I heard this voice. And it said, everything's going to be all right. And I mean, I'm telling you, I was thinking, how could everything be all right? You know, I've been married to Debbie for 25 years. I'm only 45 years old. I've got twins that are seniors in high school. We're going to go up to college. How could it possibly be all right? Well, I'm thinking this over in my head. Curtis, everything's going to be all right. I thought I'd screwed up. I went to the wrong place. That's what I really thought. I thought for sure I was going to, you know, I was a sales guy. I was going to try and talk my way out of it. You know, I did all that wrong, but you know, I want to be the right guy. Then all of a sudden, Curtis, everything's going to be all right. And in Philippians 4:7, and I don't really need to read this because it's the main thing is the peace of God which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Jesus. What happened to me after that third, Curtis, everything's going to be all right, was a peace came over me. A calmness came over me. And you all have experienced this at some time in your life, whether your kids were born or you got married or just it was just a great day. You got promoted to work maybe. And right before you go to sleep, you say, that was a great day. And you just have this calmness that washes over you. And that's the peace of all understanding. And everybody's experienced that. But what happened to me was it was like 10 minutes long. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And you know, from hearing this, I had high blood pressure and everything else wrong with me. And I have never been that calm. And I understood. I truly, truly understood. I guess it had to be shown to me, not just the voices. It had to be shown to me. It was this peace that came over me and just washed over my body. And I realized it was God.
So we were down in the hospital. He needed to go to the rehab hospital, and no, that's in the hospital. That's on Halloween, obviously. And I didn't get very many pictures, but that was one that I was able to find. It was a rough time. He was a different person. He was a totally different person. He would yell at me, and he used to be like this too before that. But when he was in the hospital, he called me names I'd never heard before coming out of his mouth. He was so mad at me for not taking him home and bringing him home. He thought it was all me, and it was my fault. And so he, so then we went to the rehab hospital, and that was an awful experience. I mean, if you've ever been in a rehab hospital, it's mostly for older people. You know, he's 45 years old, and here we are with 75 and 85-year-old people. And the intake for the rehab hospital was in this awful room. To me, it was awful because I couldn't stay with them either. Dark. There was like 6 beds with curtains and wailing men, and it was just awful. And I just couldn't even imagine leaving him there and not staying there with him. But there was no way I could, because it was just this one twin bed that he was on. I couldn't sleep with them. So anyway, I was in despair. It was just another really bad experience. So I walked out the door, and here's another sign from God. And I walked out the door, and there was one of our really good friends standing there, John. And I was like, how did you know that we were here? And he just, I just found out, and I just felt like I needed to be here this morning. Oh my gosh, it was such relief, and I felt such relief that he was there to comfort me during that time. So anyway, we're in the rehab hospital, and that was a few weeks, and Curt just really wanted to go home. And so it got to a point where it wasn't as bad. I was able to take him home, but I had to learn how to catheterize him. He wasn't able to walk. He couldn't see, hardly. Of course, he lied about all that. He told the doctors he could because he wanted to go home. But he was in bad shape. He was still in bad shape.
When she was talking about me lying about being able to see, the doctor would come in, they'd prick you or whatever, and say, oh, how you feeling, what's the pain like? They'd always give this 1 through 10, how's the pain? Yeah. I never did figure that out. Anyway, when you do have what I had, the blood is looking for a place to go. There's no place, there's not very much room in your skull. And so what it does is it bulges out your eyes. Gets in behind your eyes, and that's what blood, and so you virtually can't see. Your eyes, the muscles are all screwed up and everything else. And the doctor would come to me, and I was, you literally, when she's talking about this, I was like screaming all the time. I would throw things at nurses in the hallway to try and get look, I'm okay, get me out of here. And what happened was, is the doctor came and he said, okay, how can you see what's this TV? You know, we've all been in hospital rooms. We've seen the little TV up there. And I said, oh, it's great, super. I love it. At that time, I couldn't even see my feet, much less the wall that the TV was on. And I was lying just because that's what he wanted to hear. Now, there's one other part it was great to me. It was really a neat thing. We were finally getting ready to leave the rehab hospital, and I just want to go. Let's go. And but the whole staff came in, the nurses and the surgeons and the doctor, and they were all talking to me about what I needed to do to get past this. And one thing that was just the coolest is one guy really talked about it, and he says, you know, what you really need is you need a personal trainer. And you really need a gym to be able to go to. Well, I'm pretty blessed because Deb is a personal trainer, and we do have a gym in our house. She brings people to. And so it was almost like God was talking, okay, that's what we'll do. Let's go. Let's get out of here.
So I brought him home, and we did all kinds of, I had to bring him occupational therapy and physical therapy every single day. And it was tiring, it was exhausting, but, and I felt so alone. I felt so alone because he was a different person. It was like a child. In fact, they did an IQ test before we left, and, you know, Kurt's pretty smart, and his IQ was 80 when we came home. And, you know, I still didn't really know how to pray. I mean, I didn't even think about praying. But I'm sure in my heart I was praying. The way I pray to God now is just through me. I know I do the praying, you know, that I'm supposed to do, the way I'm supposed to do it. I try to do it. But nothing feels better to me than the way I pray just through my heart. Well, so I felt this aloneness, and so the way that I would feel better is early in the morning I would go for a run, and I would go for a run really when it's dark out. So I would sob and cry. And I remember the first time I did that, I ran and I wasn't listening to Christian music then. And I ran it and I was listening to Christina Aguilera or something, you know, back in that day. and sobbing and having all these questions in my mind and in my heart. And then then I started to hear, it's hard to describe, I don't know if you can say hear it or just feel the answers to the questions. And it scared the crap out of me. I was like, what was that? And it kept coming, and I, to this day, I feel like I said, it's hard for me to describe. I remember the first time I ran home as fast as I could to tell Curt, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. And, you know, he's like, oh, really? You know? But anyway, to this day, that's how I talk to God. That's how we communicate. And I do the other praying too, but that's how I pray to him, and that's how this came about today, because he told me over and over again on these runs, you've got to tell your story again. You have to tell the story. Kurt's told the story. I have never told the story out loud to a church or, you know, I have one-on-one to people, but I wanted people to realize that, you know, there is hope no matter what happens to you. You know, there's always hope, and that you know, God is always there for you. You know, it's just.
Fine. If we got an extra couple minutes, I'm watching the clock too, so I'll say one other thing that was just so neat to me that it happened to me. It happened many times. You know, we were talking about that this wasn't just one miracle. There wasn't just one miracle. I figured there was about 200 miracles that happened, that things that never could have happened, they happened. And when I was laying in my bed, which I did for quite a few months afterwards because I was in a wheelchair, and one thing that was really cool was, you know, because I had heard the voice, you know, I did the whole thing, and it was kind of getting to me a little bit, You know, but then God was like a 9/11 God to me. I mean, I would sit there, I would lay in bed, and it'd be, you know, evening, and I'd go, wouldn't it be the greatest thing in the world if I could just move my little finger, just like this, you know, back and forth, and control it? Wouldn't that be the greatest thing in the world? Then I'd go to sleep. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be like this, I'd be moving my finger. You know, after a while I was doing this just to see what he could do. You know, then it got to be a big thing, because then when you have something wrong with your brain too, you can't control your muscles and everything else. And so I went to bed one night, I'll never forget this too. I went to bed saying, it would be the greatest thing in the world if I could lift my arm up and hold it in one position, which I never could do, and they figured out he'll never be able to do that. I went to sleep. The next morning, that's what happened. I mean, I'm telling you, I was so amazed. It was incredible what was happening to me. And there was a number of different things, a lot of little things that happened during the time. But we're getting near our end of time, and I want to get 2 points really quick, and it will only take a minute. And the first point is that I hear percentages different than most people hear percentages. And it's not that I'm just crazy. You know, I know what God can do. You know, somebody says, oh yeah, we got a 50% chance of rain or something like that. Well, to me, that's rain. That means we're going to get rain. You know, it's a lot. If they told me it was a 5%, I'd think, oh, we're going to get rain. Because you've got to understand that the medical profession is big on these percentages things, and everything they do has got to be a percentage, and just where you are, it's just ridiculous. And they gave me so low of score, so low of a chance to actually be talking. And you've got to understand that the percentage was a decimal point and 3 zeros, and then some number, and much less than then walking. I mean, it was incredible what the percentage was. Well, here I am. You know, I'm telling you, it's incredible to me. And for that reason alone, I know that percentages don't make any difference to God. So I don't even listen to them anymore. The second thing I wanted to say is Josh gave a sermon a couple weeks ago, and I never realized it until that minute. 10 years later that happened. But Josh's sermon really sunk into me. And what he was talking about was doubting Thomas. And we all know the disciple, and we all know the story about him doubting. And, you know, I won't believe it until I put a finger in the holes in his hands. Well, I absolutely can relate to that. Because there's a rest of the story of Thomas, which Josh said in his sermon, and that's very, very interesting, is he said that after Thomas knew that Jesus was real, after that was done, you know, he spent the rest of his days going to the ends of the earth telling people exactly that. I don't know how many people listened to him, but that's what he did. And that's how come I relate to that, to Thomas about that. Because for the rest of my days, I always talk about the first half of my life, I was pretty much an idiot. And the second half, I'm going to tell people about God every chance I get, and I'm going to tell them He's real. You know, heaven's real, and I'll see you there someday. And hopefully there'll be a lot of days. And in case you haven't figured out, I work for God now. I don't work for Josh or Dale or New Creation or anything like that. I work for God. So I really think that's the highest boss you can get. So, thank you.